Hello, 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 everybody. Welcome in another episode of the Dork Side of the Ring podcast. I'm your host, your purveyor of all things dorky within the scope of professional wrestling and sports entertainment. I am Grum. It is good to have you, good to see you, good to be with you on this fine day or night or whenever you're listening to it. You could be a daytime walker like me, who works during the day and listens to podcasts during the day, or a frolicking night person, and I'm accompanying you on your nighttime frolic. It is good to have you, though. Episode 81, we've got a fun one today. We're going to be talking about the time MVP and Matt Hardy went one-on-one on a basketball court. And I couldn't think of better guests to have than the duo, the Philadelphia content machines, Mark Henry Jr., no relation to the wrestler Mark Henry, and we'll talk about that. And from You Know Ball, a Mostly Sixers podcast, TrillBroDude. Good to have both of them on. It's a fun episode today. We talk about MVPs and Matt Hardy's basketball abilities. We talk about who we think would be good basketball players from wrestling, and from wrestling, and who, from basketball would translate well to pro wrestling. Talk about the fanaticism of pro wrestling fans and just like dedication, loyalty is, because we get into it. But Trill worked at Caroline's, which used to be a pretty hot spot for wrestling content. Sam Roberts would have a live show there with wrestlers, especially around the time that, anytime WWE was in town for an event, Sam Roberts would work together and try to get them. So, Trill has some experience there. It's a fun episode. Also, Trill gives us a story I've never heard. It's very funny. It's a very funny story involving Paul Heyman at Caroline's. And I think it's very funny because I'm 99% sure that the day that Trill tells this story is also the day where I believe Paul Heyman kind of went on a rant about some stuff. So it's a good, at Caroline's on Sam Roberts' show, and good conversation there. Let's see. I guess since you last heard, a week ago was what the last. So there would have been the Iron Man match. Yeah. So the Revolution. I went 7-1 on my predictions. Good job by me. I did not do well on the prop bets that I made up, so I'm going to work on making better prop bets, especially for Wrestlemania. But I hope you guys enjoyed that. I did. I'm going to have some more stuff coming up soon as well. But I also want to talk a little bit about the actual Revolution pay-per-view, because it was a lot of fun, but it was definitely one of those ones where you got mixed bags. Some people liked the middle portion of the show. Some people didn't. Some people liked the Iron Man match all the way through. Some people didn't. They liked the last 15 minutes. Some people didn't like that there was a restart, blah, blah. And it's like, wrestling is subjective, but for my money's worth, that was the greatest Iron Man match of all time. And for me I would really like the very first 60-minute one with Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels, because unlike some other ones where I drifted in and out around minute 35 to minute 40 or 25 to 30, this one, similar to the Bret Hart and the Shawn Michaels one, was very similar in that they did a good job of telling multiple stories throughout the match. And I think that's the key. Some of the Iron Man matches, especially the Rock and Triple H, which some people regard very highly, the Cena and Orton one, which surprised a lot of people, kind of just go with oh, hey, let's get a bunch of shenanigans in the middle to get you to pay attention. Whereas, MJF and Daniel Bryan worked together to tell some really good story. The first fall didn't happen until 25 minutes in. And obviously I was like, all right, well, this is clearly, and then immediately became 2-2 because, he got kicked in the, Daniel got kicked in the dick, and MJF got two quick pinfalls off of it. And I'm like, oh, wow, okay, so this is what we're doing here. I like this, because it's like, all right, hey, you're conditioned to see high scoring, for lack of a better term, high scoring falls Iron Man matches, and you had four before the first half of the thing, but they did it in such a quick succession, and then they had later ones where to make it 3-3, And over the course of the match, you're seeing some big spots. I mean, Danielson was just going berserk with just throwing his own body into it. MJF pulling out a near perfect Asai moonsault. He definitely got his foot. You could tell it almost slipped off, but he was all right. What I really liked though was it was very clear that they were doing their, and this is why I really liked it, because they were doing an homage to the 60-man between Bret and Shawn, and it was very clear. As you're watching it, you're like, oh, okay, they're intentionally doing this. Oh, they've been doing this the whole time, but AEW storytelling is kind of weird. But they were doing the whole thing where Shawn was going into this, and it was a boyhood dream, and Bret was like, I'm gonna prove that I'm better than you. It was babyface back then. But there was an element to where Bret Hart was like, I'm better than you, and I'm gonna expose you. And Shawn said, I'm gonna stay step for step for you. And you see them, of course, throughout the match, but the biggest one obviously being the elbow drop to the outside from MJF, where he gives the Shawn, little arm thing. Sorry, I'm remembering I'm on YouTube, but I need to explain what I'm doing. But then he does like the running tombstone onto what's left of the thing. There was just it was a modern take on the actual match itself. But it was an homage where you could feel that there were certain things that were coming. You got, hey, the last gasp to get a win in regulation, and doesn't happen. Obviously, again, it's changed a little bit because now it's a traditional babyface good guy or babyface bad guy, whereas the HBK and Shawn Michaels was babyface. And I really like that it went into overtime. I like that overtime ended because, MJF said what he would do. He's the kind of guy who will get in a car accident and put his passenger in the front seat so he can get away with it. And he does that exactly. He took the oxygen thing, bang, good. And I like the getting to that point where he's desperate. He's using the ring. He's going for this, and Bryce was like, no, Bryce did a great job too. Like I have my qualms with some of AEW's refereeing things where they make it too obvious that they're the third man. Bryce likes to get in the camera shots. Aubrey likes to get in the camera shots. And then there's there's another issue with some of the refs where they just poorly telegraph that they're not going to have a 3 count, or they're out of frame, or they're, in some cases, not checking on the talent to make sure the talent hasn't hurt themselves. But Bryce was fantastic that match. I hats off to him. The match is the Texas Death match between Hangman and Mox was my favorite match, probably going into it, and it lived up to that hype. But I don't agree with Dave Meltzer in the sense of if it's 5 stars, you can have more than 5 stars. But it's very clearly that the Iron Man match, the greatest Iron Man match of all time, match of the night, just beating out Hangman and Mox. Although that match was great, I love that Hangman reminded us all once again why he was, why they call him Hangman Adam Page. I thought it was important that it got to that point. I know we did this with Adam Cole a little bit, but his feud against Adam Cole, but this felt like more important because there's a not a disconnect, but there's a lack of, if you're somebody listening, you're like, why do they call this guy Hangman? That's why he's willing to hang a dude to win a match, and that's important. And it was pretty kick-ass to do. Kick-ass, much like this week's episode. Myself, TrillBroDude, Mark Henry Jr. of Fox Sports The Gambler. We'll get all that information. I'll get that later. Let's get to it. This week, we're talking about Matt Hardy and MVP going one-on-one in basketball, and also their Backlash 2008 match for the U.S. title. Well, it's all right here on the Dork Side of the Ring podcast. So, the reason why I wanted to record this part. So, it's a fun story. We're talking about, Tom Bro Dude, rest in peace, to hilarious, just one of the greatest Twitter account.
Definitely. It's up there, top 5 at least.
And to this day, my girlfriend, who is not as chronically online as me, will sometimes go at LeBron James. You like what you see whenever I'm watching basketball. But So it's very funny when that happens. But one of my favorite stories about this is very recent, like more recent. Trill Withers, Tyler I Am was talking about TrillBroDude on his Patreon show a couple years ago. And somebody in the Patreon Discord was listening, and they're like, "Who the hell is Tom Brody?" Because Tyler said TrillBroDude, I guess, fast enough, and we just it's one of those things that just is like, "Hey man, what do you guys think that Tom Brody's doing? Like, you think he's still looking for Tom Brody?
Still has no idea."
And he thought it was like, oh, he's making fun of Tom Brady. Like, so he's doing the, like Tom Brody, like LeBron James. Like, no, we're talking about TrillBroDude. And then it had a nice day in the Discord of just all of the tweets and just, before Elon decided that he was going to, nuke the entire website.
Sure. Oh my God. Yeah, I know.
There's so many that are just lost to time.
Well, the LeBron James one became its own thing to the point where Kentucky football, I think it was last year, tweeted something. Did you see that?
No.
I believe it was Kentucky football. Maybe I'm getting this wrong, but they tweeted a picture of a football and said, "Do you like what you see?" Like it became its own kind of tweet. I feel like it became its own genre of tweet. So even though Tom's account is not around anymore, the legacy lives on.
The influence, but yeah, that's
him and Trill Ballins, the old guard. The old guard of Twitter.
Man, if only they could. I mean, look, I'm just saying right now, if Tom was still. Elon would not stand a chance. He would have Michael Pornman would be.
He would single-handedly take it then.
Michael Pornman would be eradicated from the website anytime. Elon would have somebody code to be like, "All right, if you ever see this photo of Michael Pornman, get rid of it. I want that automatically deleted off the servers."
Oh my God!
But
God, I didn't even think of the potential of Tom versus Elon. It would be amazing.
It would be Kong versus Godzilla. I don't, it's just insane. But no, and then that made me think about the time, in honor of him, the posting of Michael Pornman to 6ABC to the point where 6ABC erroneously put Michael Pornman digitally in the seats of the Citizen Bank Vault.
So good. So good.
And it's just like, you had to be there. I think didn't Michael Pornman make an NBA bubble appearance?
I feel like there was something related to that. I think that was kind of.
I know there was a Chris Dorner who made who made an appearance in the bubble because the internet is unholy. It's an unholy.
Yeah, I know someone did at one point. Someone did locate Michael Pornman and found his online presence. They found the guy who was really Michael Pornman, his real name, and yeah. So
that he's an internet star, and he's like, man, how do I capitalize on this? And it's like, buddy, you can't, because you have to. It's one of those things where cool, you're going viral. You don't want to claim that that's you, though.
All the wrong reasons. Yeah, exactly. Unless you want to re-up your adult fantasy career.
Yeah, no, I want to claim this, and buddy, they're just posting your naked buttocks.
Yeah, I was gonna say, how do I monetize my own ass? Portman was ahead of his time before OnlyFans.
Yeah, he's probably like, damn, if only.
Yeah, it's like when we talk about oh man, imagine if Jaleel Okafor was drafted in the 90s. What if Pornman just came around, Rashard Lewis in this NBA? Come on.
Michael Pornman in the OnlyFans era? Done.
It's a comedy.
Done. No. Yeah, no, that's another, geez, yeah, no. No. The amateur porn is going off at, Michael Pornman didn't get to see it.
He missed his window. It's a real sliding doors moment.
It's like Mike Bibby on the Kings, We're here on the Dork Side of the Ring, not an OnlyFans podcast. Certainly not a Michael Pornman podcast, but it's a good time we have ourselves today. I've got two great guests. The Philly influence is strong. It's delusional optimism, as I like to fiend on it. We've got from Fox Sports Philly from the Tough Cover, Mark Henry Jr. Hello, how goes it?
Hello, how you doing?
Good. And on the other side of the digital table, we've got TrillBroDude from the host of You Know Ball, a mostly Sixers podcast. Welcome, welcome, friends. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited. I mean, I don't know if I would call myself a delusional optimist, but Mark might be closer to that end of the spectrum whenever we have conversations.
Yeah. If you want rational conversation, go to Trill. If you want conversation about how Nikola Jokic is a fat slob who stat pads all over the place, then we can talk about that on the Tough Cover.
Look, I go back and forth in between, so it works. Today I'm very nuanced in that saying Jokic is a really great is a top 3 player in the NBA and probably is going to win the NBA. Tomorrow, I'm right with Mark. I'm saying he's a fat slob. I'm body shaming him. Cancel Grum for not supporting his fellow big men. But
it's also racist of you to admit that. As the discourse has proven today.
It's just I don't know. It's just wild that the where that goes. Look, we're gonna get all over the place. I'm sure I know for a fact we are definitely talking about basketball today. I have found something perfect for the two of you to join in with me today. But before we do that, I like to let my guests introduce themselves. So, Mark, we'll start with you because alphabetically M comes before T. You have the floor. Let the people know a little bit about you.
Yeah, I do mostly gambling stuff. Definitely a lot of NFL draft stuff as well. That's kind of my two breads and butters, I'd say. And then, I go on with Trill sometimes to talk Sixers, and, I talk a lot of Sixers on my radio show in general. But that's definitely, gambling and the NFL draft. So that's why when you hit me up to talk wrestling, or when anyone hits me up to talk wrestling, sometimes there's wrestling roundtables at the radio station, Fox Sports The Gambler. They'll do them. Sometimes they'll leave me out, and I'm always upset if I get left out of the wrestling conversation because sometimes, because I'm such a gambling nut, because I'm such a draft nerd, I don't think people realize that, I go to bed watching, the 1992 Royal Rumble, which I have on my sweater right here, a nice little Royal Rumble sweater. So I think that sometimes I don't tweet enough about my wrestling background for people to know that I'm even into it. So I'm always pumped to talk about it. I've been a fan pretty much my whole life.
His dad was one of the most famous wrestlers. So.
Yes, yeah. Yeah. No relation, if you couldn't tell, no relation to Hall of Famer Mark Henry. I think it's a little obvious, but again, we've already established that Nikola Jokic is the MVP currently today. So but where can the people, speaking of social media and everything, where can the people find you, Mark?
You can find me at Mark Henry Jr. _ on Twitter, and you can check out at Fox PHL Gambler on Twitter. There's a lot of my stuff's going on over there. And then I'm doing some stuff with BGN, Bleeding Green Nation, BGN Radio, The Painted Lines, mostly NFL draft stuff. We have a draft podcast where we're ranking our position groups every week. And my buddy Dibes going nuts with the highlights, splicing them in. It looks like I'm on Sports Center on this draft show. So it's pretty cool. I get to just show up and spit my nerdist knowledge about the draft. While they make me look smart with the highlights around it. So
who are the Eagles getting at 10? Yeah, what's your ideal pick there?
I think and hope that it's going to be Myles Murphy. I've completely convinced myself that Howie's in love with the trenches, and that's going to be the guy. He's falling unjustly. He's my number 3 overall guy, and it's PFF just dropped him to 22 today, where he's been a top 5 to 10 prospect pretty much this whole way, and tested well with what he did do at the combine. So
I was gonna say if I remember correctly, maybe I'm off here. That's the Clemson edge rusher?
Yeah.
Clemson edge rusher who's like super athletic, right?
Yeah. He can play inside, outside, 6'5". He's got the size to kind of to bounce inside. They love to rotate guys, so I think there'll be plenty of snaps to go around, even if you have Sweat and Reddick, even if you have BG, to be honest.
Now, he's not the guy who tore his Achilles and then came back in about 6 months somehow with no like effect at all, right? No, it was a different Clemson player, right?
No, that's Brian Brzee. That's the defensive tackle. Yeah. He was actually like kind of the whole year during the season, he was the higher ranked player, but they were both in the top 10. And I think as soon as the draft nerds really started pouring over the tape, there's a lot there's a lot to pick apart there. And when you add that with the injury concerns he's had, Brzee has kind of fallen a little bit into being a fringe first rounder. He's a second day guy for me.
I'm not like, I don't really once the Sixers started being good and I didn't need to pretend to care about college basketball anymore, I stopped like watching college sports as much. But I'm like, that guy's number 1 on my board because he's not human.
He's that dog.
He tore his Achilles in like May, and by October he's ready to go, and that's insane. But
I've never heard of anything like that before. That's wild.
And probably meanwhile, the NBA guy blows his Achilles out, and we're like, all right, like he's back now, right?
Yeah. See you in 2025, Brandon Clark.
Yeah. But yeah, so that's cool. I like I said, I'm him and Will Anderson. Those are my 1 and 2. I mean, Will Anderson is not going to be there, but if he's at 5, I want him. I'll be wherever he goes, I go. Trill, what about you? You, as I said, the host of the Ball, a mostly Sixers podcast. The floor is yours. Tell the people about you.
Yeah, so if you already know me, it's probably because of trade slop, which is a term that we popularized on the Ball podcast. So I'm obviously cover the NBA, cover the Sixers. I used to be more of just general Sixers podcast. And then it became more of a general NBA podcast. And obviously I have a new co-host, Sam, who is at NBA Baby Secret. And we do 2 episodes a week of Ball. We also do streams on Playback. Mark has been on a few times, as he said, for Sixers games where we watch the games together with the Ball community. And then, we talk NBA, we talk mainly transactional stuff, but when there isn't a lot of that to talk about, we'll talk about all the other stuff that's happening. And then I think the other thing that people know us for is we make fun of Bill Simmons a lot, which is like, that's been kind of the thing that has made us popular. So, I guess I would say it's like equivalent to like if Pardon My Take got famous for making fun of like all the first takes and the Pardon Your Interruptions and stuff like that. We do that, but with NBA podcasts. So if you like that stuff, subscribe to the podcast, and then if you like that, sign up for the Patreon like Grum has, and I appreciate your support. And then in addition to that, I don't know if we'll talk about our relationship to wrestling, but I have a less knowledge than you guys, obviously, but I do have some connections.
Well, we'll start there. Again, I before we do, highly recommend it. Love Ball. I am a hog myself. I'm a nice. I roll in that slop daily, nearly, and it's great. I love it. Also, I do love. You sold yourself a little short. It's making fun of Bill Simmons, and talking about what is and what isn't tough. What's not.
Yeah,
tough?
It's true.
Direct.
Yeah. It's absolutely true. Yeah, the Keith. I always forget about the Keith thing. Those clips still pop up like occasional. Like that was probably our most viral moment, I guess you would say, when we first started making fun of Keith and his Keith Pompey, who is a Sixers writer, for his ad reads that he did on a show. And then, of course, the one that's the most famous is the one where he directly led from a story about 9/11 into a DirecTV ad which is I mean, that was crazy. I had people reaching out to me that like heard it on like national radio shows and shit. Like it was wild how big that clip got. That clip is bigger than anything that I've ever done.
It's so funny to me, like as somebody who does a podcast and I edit my podcast and I don't have it on the scale or like the resources that Keith has with basically the like a pseudo official Sixers podcast.
Sure.
And they're like, no one said, all right, Keith, redo that part. Let's not go from talking about 9/11
Yeah.
to subscribing to DirecTV. You know what's not tough? Subscribing to DirecTV. Like,
well, that's the problem with making daily content, dude. Like, they don't have enough. They didn't. They at least have a co-host with him now, and I'm sure that guy edits it. Yeah. So
No,
when it's Keith and someone else, he's fine. When it's Keith by himself, things can get a little weird.
Hey, man, the floor's wet. Look at the wet.
Yeah, exactly.
I do like that you have taken that moment and capitalized on it. So whenever you plug your Patreon, it is, you know, it's not tough. Subscribe to Ball.
Yeah, it's literally the main image. It's not tough at all to subscribe.
Yeah, and as somebody who does it, I can confirm it's not tough at all. So, we were talking about your wrestling experience. I like to get my guests' background with professional wrestling and sports entertainment. So, and I know there's a little story, and we're going to pull it out of you if we have to. Maybe, who knows? But yeah, what's your experience with pro wrestling?
So I grew up a huge pro wrestling fan, probably about to the time I was like 12 years old. So 2002, I'm 32, about to turn 33. Let's go. Nice. So mainly grew up on, the golden era, the 90s, Stone Cold, D-Generation X. By the way, I got a lot of shit from people on one of my playbacks because I called Triple H Triple X, and in my brain they were like, "Oh, what is it, Vin Diesel?" And then I was like, "Okay, first off, Triple H and was in D-Generation X."
He was
yes, exactly. I wrote, when I was in third grade, I wrote a book about D-Generation X and X-Pac. So I have that still at my parents' house. That was my favorite growing up. Love them. And then obviously I kind of fell off when I got into my teenage years. I stopped really paying attention, but had like a little bit of a casual following of it. And then more recently, I guess my only connection to wrestling was I worked at a comedy club in New York City called Caroline's on Broadway, which used to host Sam Roberts' radio show. He would do live there on Sirius XM. So we had wrestling events a lot. So I have a few stories of that. One time, I don't know if I should just get into it right now, but the most recent experience I had was, this must have been 2017, I guess it was. They always had these big names, but I don't follow wrestling anymore, so I didn't know any of them. It was, Kevin Owens and all these people, and like they were all cool. Like I worked with them on like a few different things. And then there's this one time I was actually walking out of Caroline's, and as you can see, I have very long hair. I've always pretty much had long hair. And I hear an older dude, bald guy, and I walk by him, and from behind he can see me, and he goes, "Hey, you bum! What are the barbers out of town in this city? Get a haircut." And I turned around, and it's Paul Heyman, who I didn't know he was. I had no idea who he was. And I'm like, "Excuse me? I just thought it was a random guy." And I'm like, and they're like, "Oh no, that's his thing." He thought I was a guy that worked on the production team, and he thought he was one of his like guys that he knew. And he was like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry, you weren't who I thought you were." But they were like, "You just got roasted by Paul Heyman. That's actually like an honor." Yeah. And I was like, "Okay, cool." And then I found out who he was and shit. So
Paul Heyman is an interesting dude. Like, he could have done anything with his life. Like he was basically club promoting in the 80s, and like I forget what club it was. It was a big club, like
Studio 66.
Thank you. I was drawing the blank on the name, but he basically could have just parlayed that into just being a club promoter and making his entire. He's like, "I want to do pro wrestling. Like, I'm just gonna go sneak into shows and be like, hey, how do I get? I want to do this," and then fall into like being friends and like a student of the game with some of the greatest managers of all time, and then promote it. He was like, I'm going to put Bam Bam Bigelow and some schmuck in the middle of Studio 66, and they're going to wrestle, and that is going to be an event, and people are going to come out, and I'm going to get everybody here to come out for it, and it was a big success, and they're like, wait a second, who are you? And then he just...
His documentary, I don't know if his documentary's on Peacock, but his documentary is unbelievable. Paul Heyman, I'm a huge ECW mark, so Paul Heyman's like a god.
Well, let's get into it then, Mark. Funny enough, Mark, what is your experience with pro wrestling and sports entertainment?
Yeah, so I'm 26. So what I grew up on, technically what was on TV was the Ruthless Aggression era. That's kind of, 02 I can kind of remember. The first event I can remember watching on TV was Wrestlemania 18 with Rock and Hogan. I remember watching the rematch the next year, and then I remember WrestleMania 20. Those are kind of like tentpole events of my childhood. But I was watching live, but the main way I was consuming was my older cousins were giving me these VHSs of, here, watch 1998 King of the Ring, watch Mick Foley fall off the cell, like, here, watch Shawn Michaels and Razor Ramon in the ladder match at WrestleMania 10. Like, we were tape trading basically among cousins as kids. So that's kind of how I got into, and my favorite stuff, and it seems like everyone's favorite stuff, was the 90s or the late 90s, the Attitude Era, and even the new generation era of the 90s. I've went back and chronologically watched all that era and listened to all these pods, and I'm so addicted to wrestling podcasts in terms of all the Conrad Thompson podcasts, the Lapsed Fan. There's a lot of podcasts that I listen to that cover old shows, and so that's definitely my current relationship. And I watch pretty regularly at this point. I went to WrestleMania at MetLife a few years ago. It's funny, my fiance, she doesn't hate sports or anything. Like, I wouldn't say she likes going to Sixers games. She likes the Sixers, but she's actually gotten into WWE more than she's gotten into any of the other sports that I cover and watch, because she used to watch Total Divas. And so that has kind of allowed me now to watch a lot more wrestling, since she's always down to watch the pay-per-views. So that's definitely a nice positive. But I love wrestling. I watch the old stuff constantly. I wouldn't say I watch Raw and SmackDown every week. I kind of follow through. Like, I record it, and if I hear there's a segment I need to go watch, I kind of go skip through it. Same with AEW, and it's kind of just checking on my favorites. So, and funny kind of reference to what Trill said about Caroline's on Broadway. My fiance that I mentioned is named Caroline. So when we go to New York City, I always point out that I'm like, wrestlers always are in there. Like, I'm always like, Dolph Ziggler, like, those shows there. Like, Dolph Ziggler's like probably one of my all-time, Mount Rushmore favorites. So,
oh yeah, well, when I worked there, Dolph was like our white whale of comedians we were trying to book for those years, and we could never get him to get booked. And then apparently when I left, he did shows there. More recent, but they're closed now. They actually just closed recently. So R.I.P. to Caroline's on Broadway. Yeah, they closed. I reached out to some people that I knew that they closed like 3 or 4 months ago.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, they made it through that's gotta suck, because they made it through the pandemic.
Yeah, exactly.
The hardest thing, you're like, all right, we should be, but that's.
Dude, wrestling was like our biggest pull. Like, other than like when we got like huge name comedians, which was here and there, wrestling was honestly keeping that place alive for a while, because I mean, it's kind of like podcasting. I mean, just having a content creation following. With the basketball stuff, like, wrestling people are very dedicated. Like that's one thing. They will show up, they will spend their money, and that's unlike a lot of different industries that might have a lot of people that follow it, but they're just all casuals. They're hardcore wrestling fans in a way that I think that people don't really can't wrap their brain around until you throw events and you see how many people show up on a Tuesday afternoon at 1 p.m. You're like we would sell out 300 people on a Tuesday at 1 p.m. I'm like, how does this happen?
It is. I love telling people who have no scope or understanding of pro wrestling, like, those type of things, of being like, look, like, as much as you love, like like as much as you love anime, as much as you love like My Hero Academia or or Bleach or Dragon Ball Z or whatever, like it will never reciprocate that love. Like you will never, you might hear the voice actors or the animators reciprocate love and appreciation, but there's like a level to it where I've often said pro wrestling is the last true form of Shakespearean theater.
When Mark was saying that about his fiance, or I'm sorry, girlfriend, or I was thinking the same exact thing. It is the last kind of like just like piece of modern theater that we have that is like has its own like massive like worldwide following.
Yeah, and because like you said, it's worldwide because everywhere in the world has wrestling. It is gladiators going at war, but it's also superheroes. Like it is larger than life characters at its best and purest form. It is larger than life characters who you go, damn, like man, like I know humans are really athletic and but there's no reason that somebody is this athletic but also able to communicate this, right? Like with NBA, like you see players and like LeBron James is one of the most gifted athletes of all time. He's the size he is and the athleticism he is, one of a kind. The guy is not entertaining the people the same way that like a Brock Lesnar is doing it or a John Cena, and it's like because he just LeBron, that's not his primary focus because he's a basketball player and he's just himself outside, and we find it entertaining when he says that his son is NBA ready or he's gone off the wire.
Better than yeah. Actually, on my next episode, I got to figure out who he was talking about when he tweeted that based on the games last night.
Got to be Grant Williams. Got to be.
Yeah.
Free throws.
Robbie Callen broke it down and kind of
just
like
listed
down of the players that were playing. Yeah.
Well, he listed like here were the 100 players that played. I'll go to Robbie's article and then I'll be like, all right. Well, he obviously was not talking about Joel Embiid. He took Joel Embiid first in the altar. Yeah, and just speaking on that, so basically the only kind of modern athlete that is outside of this theater entertainment world that really can compare is the next great stand-up comedian, Tom Brady.
I mean,
what's the deal? People hate when you kiss your son on the lips.
Hey, have you ever like, kissed your son on the lips and he still had, some spinach from dinner in his teeth still, and then it ends up on your lips? Weird, right? And meanwhile, the whole crowd's going, yeah.
Who can relate?
The one guy
Very
relatable
like, comedy.
I can. It's like, I wouldn't have admitted that, my guy. But no, like there's an element of like athletes, traditional sport athletes who are charismatic, and you're like, yeah, they're great. Like Jalen Hurts is charismatic, Joe Burrow is charismatic. Where like there's a persona and an aura to them off the field. Whereas like in pro wrestling, they have to have that at all times. Like it's very spoken about. I know, Mark, you listen to the Conrad Thompson podcast a lot, but you always hear guys talk about they had to have the airport factor. They had to stand out in an airport to make people stop and go, who the fuck is that? Because you're like, oh, hey, you're in an airport. I'm not there to meet people. I'm there to get on my flight and go. But if you can make somebody stop in an airport, you are a star. Like currently, like Jade Cargill is my go-to of like, you see a picture of Jade Cargill and you're like, who is she? Where is she? What does she do? Like she's a star. So like, but in the NBA, like, or not baseball, never mind, because they're wearing hats all the time, so no one needs it. But like, you see these guys and you know who they are, so you don't need the aura as much because of who they are. But like, you don't get that love back. Like you go up to LeBron James, Joel Embiid, you go up to not Spencer Hawes. Don't go up to Spencer Hawes.
You're gonna say Spencer Dinwiddie.
Unless you're in red state, don't go up to Spencer Hawes.
Like you go up to like Seth Curry, you go up to like anybody in the NBA and say, hey, I love you, great game last night, like my kid loves you and everything. And they're like, oh yeah, thanks and everything. You go up to a wrestler, you go up to Dolph Ziggler, you go, hey Dolph, I love you. And you're like, hey man, hey, appreciate it. Hey, what? And then they start to have a little conversation back that even though they're probably eating or something, the way that the business is, they need you to still love them. They need you. So they need to reciprocate it, because love that goes unreciprocated is lost. So for them, they don't want to lose that. So, hey, all right, cool. Yeah, I'll sign your thing, take a picture with you, listen to you tell a story about how your kid wanted me to lose and cried because I won, like, or, your dad watched me, and like whatever stories, and those things are just creates a bond that is unique to pro wrestling. And then you saw Trill with like, people are willing to be, I get $7.25 an hour. I don't care. I'll buy $100 seat ticket to Caroline's on a Tuesday morning afternoon. Like,
yeah, and unless you have long hair and you run into Paul Heyman,
I'm never gonna get over that. That's great. I'm sure somebody's gonna wait. So they fried his ass. They fried him. It's like, yes, they did.
Yeah, got him.
To be fried by Paul Heyman, it's bucket list stuff.
Exactly. It's like getting roasted by Jeff Ross.
Exactly. You're like,
who's actually very nice to me, which complete opposite.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, I'm a firm believer that, like, in pro wrestling, the worst bad guys are the best people, because they're just like, I'm just going to be the antithesis of who I am. And like, and it's the nice guys who are dicks, like Hulk Hogan. Like, oh yeah, like I love Hulk Hogan. He's my dude's a racist off the day. He's a dickhead.
Yeah, sure.
Like, Hulk Hogan was a very good heel, though.
He also was, because he was just being himself, brother.
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't work for me, brother.
Young Randy Orton.
Yeah. Yeah, it's another one. Yeah, young Randy Orton was beloved as a babyface and just an absolute dickhead until. I mean, there's still elements of him being a dickhead, but yeah. So like that's it's a beautiful thing, the relationship between fans of pro wrestling and the actual people performing, because it's like a symbiotic. Like they need each other. Although the pandemic proved that that's not necessarily the case, but still. But yeah, so Mark, super fan, got on around the time that Trill got off of the train, and. So it's good. This is good. I like having somebody who's like, I kind of stayed away. I fell out of love with it, and I also love the people who are like, I'm fucking addicted to it, and I'm just like smashing up like candies. Like, yeah, all right, give me some more wrestling content. Today's topic, something up both of your wheelhouses, I think. But before we get to that, if you could say you have the ability to actually perform comparable to the average NBA player, right? Who's the best player you think you could beat if you were an average NBA player in a game of 1-on-1?
Oh my god!
All baskets are 1 point, so you got to make 11 baskets.
So hold on, you need to flesh this out more.
All right.
Because I need to imagine a world where I'm not the worst. Like I always say, like pickup game wise, I was PJ Tucker before PJ Tucker was PJ Tucker. Same. I was like corner threes, hustle rebounds, trying really hard on defense, can't dribble a basketball kind of guy.
I was the post version of that. I was
gotcha.
6'2" in high school. So like,
yeah,
offensively, I get the rebound, put it back up, we're fine. That's how I got all my points. I averaged 20 and 10 in rec league because I was 6'2" and the next tallest guy was 5'11". So
there you that's
yeah.
I was TJ McConnell.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah. TJ McConnell, the hustle guy. You got great
copy TJ McConnell. Maybe a little dirtier than TJ though.
Maybe.
So I'll throw a bell.
Oh wow! All right. So Grayson Allen.
Hey, I don't think I've been a tripper before. I think tripping is a little word. Like I think I embellish the contact, or
gotcha. Yeah,
maybe a little more smart than
puppy dog.
Yeah. Okay, all right. Good. Marcus Smart, solid.
None of the skills though. None of the
passing craft and.
All right. Okay. So you are the best version of yourself in a pickup game, but in the NBA level. So for you, Trill, you are PJ Tucker.
Sure.
For Mark, you are Marcus Smart, or TJ McConnell, or Grayson Allen. Somewhere in that scale, those are three wildly different skills. I think. I think that TJ as much as I love him, is the worst of the three, but not by much compared to Grayson. But like you one-on-one with your now recognized abilities, maybe not who you think you can beat, because then that's a question of like, all right, well, who does PJ Tucker or these guys? Who do you want to beat one-on-one?
So wanting to beat someone is different. I think if logically, I actually just had this conversation a few weeks ago because we were talking. If all points are equal, all points are 1 point.
Yes.
If you're PJ Tucker, if you're the PJ Tucker equivalent, you got to just pick the smallest guard you can and then just post them up every possession, right? Like that's the only way. Like
So
PJ Tucker.
Isaiah Thomas.
I was going, well, if current players, you would go like Bones Highland or some shit. You know what I mean? Like you would go someone that like not only is smaller than you and can't create the advantage of just chucking threes the whole game. And then you go, oh shit, like, well, I lose because they're just going to beat me off the bench. Like you're not going to be able to get around. Like we're assuming PJ Tucker, I'm the PJ Tucker that's still like pretty adequate defensively. like, you know, he's been fine recently, but like on the whole, who's the player I would want to beat the most? I actually like, I swear to God, I really don't hate that many players. Mark, you go through your pick and then I'll come up with mine for this. Cause I kind of find myself not really hating players as much as other, like, I guess beating like a Trae Young would be really satisfying because Trae can be a little bit of a brat, and it would be a lot of fun to beat. But I can't imagine a world where PJ Tucker beats Trae Young 1-on-1.
Yeah, I feel like my answer doesn't make sense to answer like who I could beat, like the TJ McConnell. Like I don't know who TJ McConnell's beating 1-on-1. That's a tough. It's a tough matchup, but who I'd want to beat, Trae would be on the list. I kind of softened on my hate for Trae. I think only because so many people hate him now that it's not like this is kind of stupid, but like I was a big Luka guy in his draft, so draft takes are like my bread and butter in terms of that's kind of how I root for or against players. And I was out on Trae. I didn't think he could defend at the NBA level. I didn't have him in my top 10. I was wrong. But I still think...
Well, you were right. He can't defend at the NBA level. He's just so good on offense.
Or like what? I didn't think he'd be so good on offense that it overcomes that. But I do think... I don't know if you're winning anything with Trae Young at this point. But anyway, like when it was at a point where it was like, ooh, icy, you know, he's better than Luka. You know, who got the better end of that deal? Like I hated Trae so much. But now that everyone kind of hates him, it's kind of like, you know, I don't really care anymore.
I feel like I'm a defender now, if anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, same here, actually. I think he's like kind of getting disrespected at this point. Yeah. But I mentioned it on my radio show with Trill. I'm very annoyed with Damian Lillard. Like, someone just get Chris Haynes away from him. Like, stop telling people how much you love Portland. Nobody cares. Like, not a solitary soul on the planet cares that you love Portland at this point, Dame. But it makes no sense because TJ's like a foot shorter or whatever. But Al Horford's my least favorite. You know,
yes, that's a good one. Yeah, Sixers. I swear to God, people were making fun of me on the playback the other night for hating on Al Horford, and I was like, you know what? I just think he's the fakest person in the NBA. I think the whole persona's fake. I don't think he's really this like good guy that like. I was like, I'm sorry. I don't buy it at all. I think he's annoying. Yeah, exactly. You can't have Anna Horford as your sister and be not the most insufferable person.
Normal for an adult brother and sister to be that close. Like, don't read anything into it. It's totally normal.
Al Horford's a great one. In the same vein of that, I'm gonna go with Dylan Brooks.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah,
because Dylan, there was a poll on Twitter many years ago of if you could score on Harrison Barnes or not. I was feeling my oats that day, and I voted yes, I would be able to score on Harrison Barnes. I couldn't score on Harrison Barnes. I could score on Dylan Brooks because Dylan Brooks does this thing every time he's playing basketball where he just forgets that he's playing basketball and he just completely becomes a nothing. And it's just like, hey, Dylan, the ball's supposed to go in the hoop, you dribble the ball, and you pass it, right? And then on defense, you stand in front of your guy. And he does this thing at least for a 3-minute stretch every time I have watched Dylan Brooks, he just forgets. I think I can score a basketball in real life. If you make me an average NBA player, I'm giving him, it's 11-2. I'll give him 2 points. That's it.
Man, it's so much nicer not live streaming. Like,
Oh,
I'm used to live streaming everything, so I'm like,
yeah, I'm live with FCC airwaves.
Yeah.
honestly, I always forget that when I come on your show, dude. Like, I swear one time I'm just.
I don't know how I haven't. Like,
It's kind of amazing.
So funny. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, if it wasn't
Like,
apparent when I cursed, cursing is allowed. I need to put that in my little pamphlet when I send that link of like, hey, like, cursing is allowed.
Encouraged.
Yeah, encouraged, in fact. But all right, technical difficulties aside, Mark, did you hear who I had picked?
no.
Okay, I picked Dylan Brooks. Because I think I can score on him in real life. So if you give me average NBA talent, I think I could beat him 11-2. And I'm dog walking him, and I'm talking about it the entire time. Like I'm like you. I don't hate a lot of players. I may hate like a contingent of like, you know, fans who really love that player. Like Trae Young, I kind of like with Marvel. I'm like, I just still don't believe in Trae Young as like the best player on a championship, but he's still a good player. Like he's having a bad year and he's still having, you know, objectively good numbers, except for shooting. But like Dylan Brooks is just like my least favorite player, and by
which is so funny because I feel like Dylan Brooks is the closest thing that we have to a wrestling heel in the NBA.
Oh yeah.
Does he not? Like, I mean, like he dresses up. He like just like says like weird off the cuff things. He looks like a guy that would be a wrestling heel.
The entire Memphis Grizzlies are the heel because you just want that. They just talk so much. You're like, shut up, lose. Like,
yes,
like shut up and lose. What were you gonna say, Mark?
Maybe I'm a hater, but I feel like Jimmy is such a heel.
Oh,
Like maybe it's specific to me. Maybe I wouldn't feel like that if I was a fan of like the Trailblazers. But like he's just, you know, it's like I work harder than you, and you know,
that's true.
PJ, it's just like
that's a good one. Yeah, the Tobias Harris thing last year when he essentially like just like made up. Like I always talk about Jimmy Butler as a persona. Like is like one of the greatest, and Jimmy's an amazing player. Don't get me wrong. He's one of the. I think if anything, he's underrated. Like I think that when you get into a playoff series, there's very few guys you'd rather have than Jimmy Butler, but he has created this mythology of who he is as a person.
Yeah.
And it is largely created on the things you're talking about, the hardworking persona, the essentially like pull yourself up by your bootstraps mentality, and then also like rewriting history with the Tobias Harris thing, which is like not what happened at all, but everyone just accepts it as fact because he says it. And I'm like screaming like we did not pick him over. We had money to sign both of them. This is completely illogical.
We picked Brett Brown and Ben Simmons over. If we're doing it, hey, it was either or. The Sixers office and front office and ownership picked Brett Brown and Ben Simmons over Jimmy Butler. Like,
and by the way, everyone would have made that decision at the time. Like, I know revisionist history, it looks terrible, and you know it looks like such a terrible decision. Jimmy Butler also refused to shoot here. Like Jimmy Butler wasn't shooting, and we needed him to shoot if he was going to be here. Obviously, the wrong decision, 100%. But it was more about Ben over Jimmy when Jimmy clearly didn't love it here and didn't want to shoot, which you needed your guy next to Joel to do. I mean, I'll argue this every day that James Harden has been a much better Sixer than Jimmy Butler was.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that the what Jimmy has become since he went to Miami, as great as he is, I don't think that there's a better context for who he is and what he wants to be than Miami.
Baby.
I don't think that he would have been maximized here in the same way. Now, the Sixers might have been able to win just on the sheer talent of Joel Embiid and Jimmy Butler, but I don't think the maximization of either of them would have been done in the same way that you could argue that Harden maximizes Embiid as a play finisher.
And I remember explaining to I have a friend who's a Nets fan, and we were going back and forth, and he was like, look, like he's not going to be good for you. Harden's playing bad for you. And he's like, he's not. You think he's going to be as good as Jimmy Butler was for you? And I'm like, stop right there. And I went and got the numbers off Basketball Reference. I said, who's who? Because their numbers are identical. And he's like, no, that one's clearly Jimmy. And I'm like, no, like that one was Harden. Harden's a better, is actually shooting. He's actually, making plays offensively outside of the fourth quarter. Like that was Jimmy's thing. It was like, get him to the fourth quarter. He's good.
The closer. Yeah.
Which Embiid has basically taken that role. So obviously that's a Butler influence. Which
defensively, Jimmy's a way better player. But you can. But the thing.
But like you were saying, the match for.
Sure. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Because you get.
If you want to maximize Joel.
Yeah.
I'm not even necessarily saying that Harden's better than Butler right now. I don't know if you can make that argument. Even I think you could, but I'm not going to make that argument. It's more so just about Sixer in relation to how Jimmy played as a Sixer and in relation to how Harden has played as a Sixer.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But yeah, so like it's funny because now I'm trying to think of like other like who else are actual heels. Like every fan base has their heel.
D'Angelo Russell, is he a heel? I don't know if like
jobber.
Yeah, I was.
He's a very expensive jobber, but yes, a jobber nonetheless.
Like the Miz.
Well, the reason why I thought of him.
No, he's not a jobber. No, that's not fair. That's not fair to call. But at this point, I think the Miz got to the main event a couple years ago. What was that? 2 years ago? 3 years ago now.
The fact that I almost thought about booting you from the call again because the Miz is the only 2-time Grand Slam champion in WWE history, and you want to sit there and compare him to D'Angelo Russell, who is a 2-time Laker? That's it. That's all he's got. That's 2-time.
What about Rudy Gobert?
Miz and Dolph Ziggler. The Miz and Dolph Ziggler had one of my favorite matches of all time. The retirement match for Dolph, the ladder match as well. So I respect the Miz, but I feel like how they use the Miz at this point is to like put over other young guys. That's kind of what he is at this point.
He's like second run Elton Brand. Like you bring him in and he's just to make sure that there's a locker room leader. So your star drafted player who's redundant and doesn't do well, doesn't go driving 100 on the Tacony.
Send him to the PR stuff.
Yeah,
like the celebrity all-star game.
But Rudy Gobert's a good heel, like a good call for heel. Like a lot of people hate him. Him being in the obscure nothingness that is Minnesota has kind of like dwindled his heel power a bit because it's just like.
Hold on, wait! Don't say that before we play them tonight, please.
This goes out after we play them, so this is either going to
really edit that out just in case.
If we lose, it's not going in. If we win, it's going to stay in.
I've got I think they play that game at Barstool. It's like, am I the asshole? Well, I've got a game here that's who's the heel. Luka or Devin Booker? Who's the heel?
Ooh, that's a good one. I'm stealing. Let me go write that down. I'm stealing that idea.
I think Devin Booker's the heel. I don't think you can get embarrassed in Game 7, losing like 92-37 at one point in Game 7 at home when your team won like 67 games or however many games, and then talk shit when you win a game in February or March or whatever the next year.
There's two different kinds of heels going on here.
Yeah,
because you have to me I find the Phoenix Suns to be like the hall monitor heels, which are like they're doing the wrong thing. Look at them, whatever. like Chris Paul, Devin Booker have very much that energy of like, and then Luka's more like the cocky jock, spoiled brat kind of like generational wealth kind of heel, like where like he was just born with all this talent and like didn't have to work for anything and just was like the best player at 18 years old in the second best league in the world, came in head and shoulders above everyone else in his rookie class, has just basically been smoking and drinking and doing whatever the fuck he wants, and he's still so fucking good because he started at such a high level of just like it's same thing that a generational wealth person would, and the same thing that a guy that just has a bunch of natural talent would. So those are the two kinds of heels that we're dealing with. It's which one do you despise more? They're both quite annoying.
I would say so. I'm gonna workshop this idea, Mark. This is a great idea for a thing. It's definitely like who's the heel and who's the face in this. Like what's the like? I think Luka is the heel in this because there is more of an emotion for Luka than there is for Devin Booker. If you like, it's very much like Luka, you love Luka or you hate Luka. Whereas with Booker, it's like you either hate Devin Booker or he's just some guy on the Phoenix Suns. Like, he doesn't have like that star level.
I don't know. I kind of think that I think that I think Devin Booker's fastly becoming part of the Kyrie bucket getting real hooper, but like because aesthetically he has a really nice game.
Yes.
Also, Devin Booker, as much as he can be a little bit of a whiny brat himself, he did work really hard to improve his game and get to the point. Like, Devin Booker was, a role player at Kentucky and grew himself. And, part of that is Coach Cal not knowing how to use talent. But another part of that is, like, people doubted him early in his career. Empty numbers, like, not a real impact on winning. And he has made himself into one of the 12 best basketball players alive. Whereas Luka, as amazing as Luka is, I feel like a lot of Luka's, we knew from his first season, we knew from before his first season, he was basically the best guy that we've seen since like LeBron, arguably. Yeah. So the analysts were wrong about that, but smart draft people who knew that this guy was going to be the next kind of Harden type guy, and so once again, starting on third base versus starting on second base, I guess.
Yeah, it's tough because it's like they both have some good heel tendencies, but both also have like some really strong face ones where, like, you talk about Devin Booker building himself up, becoming who he is, very much a babyface thing. Luka, people just like a guy who is good at what he does, and he drinks and he's very much like that Attitude Era babyface where, sure, he's not actually a good guy, but god damn it, you want to be him. You want to be able to just not try at work and be celebrated. Like, whereas with Devin Booker, he's got to try, and he's been celebrated for it. I think Luka.
Luka's got a fuck you energy, is what I would say.
And I think that makes
some
him
Austin, some Stone Cold.
Yeah. I think he's got a little bit more. He's the heel in that if you would want to, if the two of them are going together. I feel like just one-on-one, it's tough because you hate the Suns because Chris Paul and everything Robert Sarver related stuff, and DeAndre Ayton going, I don't really want to be here, so I'll just collect it's like there's elements around Devin Booker that drag him to being a heel, but one-on-one, I think you're just like, you want one of them to win. You're not sure, and you're gonna let it play out for a little bit. But I think I
have to say, watching the Suns get embarrassed last year was a lot of fun as a neutral fan. Yes. I thought that was really fucking funny after the way that they talked for months. Yeah, exactly. I just love Kevin Durant so much that I know that he at one point was a heel, but I think that as Sam, my podcast co-host, always says, the most relatable superstar in the NBA. Like insecure, loves to be, he's addicted to Twitter. Doesn't let anyone tell him what to do. So that's now another added layer on top of all this with the KD Kyrie stuff. So
I think I'm thinking about it. Yeah, Devin's probably the heel because you still want Luka doesn't like Brad. Like Luka is naturally talented. He has the born on third energy, but he also doesn't like flaunt it, whereas like Devin Booker is like, I'm self-made, I did this, winners work, winners keep working, and you're just like, oh man, I just want to see Luka. Don't double team me, don't, like, you're just like, meanwhile Luka, he's not even working out in the offseason, he's going partying, he's sitting on a beach in some European country that you don't know about. You're like, where the
for rich guys.
Luka's in a hookah bar in the summer while Devin Booker is whining in an LA Fitness about getting double teamed by Joakim Noah.
Yeah, Luka's hanging out with Bond villains. He just doesn't know that they're Bond villains.
Yeah. There was a famous post from a guy on Twitter. His name's Celtics Riley, and it was exactly what you're talking about right now, where it was like Luka in the offseason at the hookah bar, like drinking, smoking, whatever. And then it was Jason Tatum at, FIBA or whatever and working out. And it was like, you basically, you can only achieve greatness by, fucking working hard and whatever. And I was like, I never thought I would see a Celtics fan defending a black guy over a white guy. And it's like, look at this. And this is an amazing twist. Amazing twist.
No. Absolutely. Meanwhile, right underneath that is a tweet about how Kyrie's stomping on Lucky was an act of war.
Against the Irish people. Against my people. Yeah.
Like, oh, look here. We better be. We're lucky that the Irish are just have an island and are being suppressed by the Brits many years ago. Otherwise, that's an act of war, and the Empire of Ireland would wage war against us for that. It's like,
exactly,
dog. It's paint. Like it's not even paint. It's tape. Sometimes I don't know. It's fucking too expensive for me.
What a fun controversy that was.
It was. But. Speaking of controversy, it's not a good one. Anyways, we've got our topic today. Like I said, it's fitting for you too, and one-on-one basketball and who the heel is and everything. We're going to go back in time a little bit. We're going to go to August of 2007. So, Mark, you might be putting some pieces together here. In the summer of 2007, there was the MVP, Montel Vontavious Porter, was the U.S. champion. He was proud. He was very loud. He was the most expensive free agent in WWE history. Like, that's his whole gimmick, that he was very much just came in and was like, I'm the quintessential, like, NBA ballers but come to life. And he found himself in a rivalry with the humble and fan favorite Matt Hardy over the U.S. title. And Matt Hardy simply said, I can beat you at whatever. And I would like that U.S. title. And MVP would say, no, not today. Well, eventually MVP, they found he had a heart condition and it needed to be settled before he could actually wrestle again. But they didn't want to take him off TV. So Matt Hardy and MVP would try to one-up each other in various contests, pizza eating contests, weightlifting contests, boxing. But one of the more famous ones is a one-on-one contest on SmackDown. They played first to 11, all baskets to one. It's MVP versus Matt Hardy. We're going to watch that. We're also going to watch Matt Hardy take on MVP at Backlash 2008 after he came back from a ruptured appendix. And they battle for the U.S. title, the payoff of this feud. So we're going to watch that. We'll be right back here on the Dork Side of the Ring. Hey, everybody. Just wanted to take a break from this great talk. While we're in the past watching stuff, we're going to talk about what's coming to the Dork Side of the Ring Patreon, the Grum Patreon, support.grum.tv. This weekend, we're going to have an early access to a video I just recorded today. As I'm recording this, I'm doing a tiering of all the main events from Wrestlemanias, from WrestleMania 1 to 38, which is about 41 or so. We're going to do that. It's going to be up there. Early access as well as exclusive access to a watch along from episode 67, the Lions Den match. Myself, It's Only Jill, and JoJo Says Bree, talking about the Lions Den match between Owen Hart and Ken Shamrock from SummerSlam 1998. All that and more, as well as working. I'm actually going to put a little behind the scenes stuff, what I'm working on for the Sami Zayn project I'm working on to have hopefully out in the next week or two. Hopefully you don't have it there, but all that, support.grum.tv. For as low as $1, you can help support the podcast. You can help support me. You can also continue to do that by leaving a 5-star review and a rating on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and liking and subscribing and commenting on the YouTube episodes of this at youtube.com/@dorksideofthering. I will see you guys after the rest of this for more. Let's get back to the episode. But we're back here on the Dork Side of the Ring. We just watched the one-on-one game between MVP and Matt Hardy, and we watched MVP and Matt Hardy for the U.S. title at Backlash 2008. Mark, your first impressions of what we watched?
Yeah, it was like it was it was a mid-card match, that. But I did actually at the time. It was one of the better stories going on. And it kind of, because of what you mentioned with the injury, it played out over a long period of time, and they had all these non-wrestling segments. And then did they win the tag belts together?
They did. So when at the week after the one-on-one against Deuce and Domino, they beat Deuce and Domino for the world title, for the WWE tag team titles, and had them until I guess about November, December of 2007. So for a couple months there.
Yeah, it was a well-built story. And, obviously you had the moment at WrestleMania and then Backlash, you have a match. It's kind of good storytelling. Do I care that much about it? No, because Matt Hardy kind of stinks as a babyface. But, yeah, MVP at this point, it was, I feel like they had already reached diminishing returns with MVP. As I said, like, that's a main event gimmick. Like, that's like Mr. Perfect. I feel the same way about Mr. Perfect. Mr. Perfect, once they put him in the mid-card, when they brought him on the roster, they were never going to be able to elevate him above that to the main event. And I think that you see that with a lot of gimmicks where sometimes guys need to be brought in on top. And that's how I feel about MVP. I feel like that about Mr. Kennedy, too. Like, Mr. Kennedy was in the same era, kind of phased out just because, when you're in the mid-card that long and you see you beat a certain amount of people and lose to a certain amount of people just stop taking you seriously. So I kind of think that's what already had happened with MVP. But the problem with this match in terms of like buying in was Matt Hardy, in my opinion.
Gotcha. Good analysis. I love that. See, that's why I love having a fan on, because they look at it from a completely different way than a non-fan. Speaking of non-fans, Trill, what was your first impression of what we watched?
Well, it was extremely 2000s. You had a Jim Jones balling reference. You had Shaq and D-Wade, Kobe, and then two guys fought over a wrestling belt post 9/11 that was the American Championship belt. So it doesn't get much more mid 2000s than patriotism, the Shaq, Wade, and Kobe, and a Jim Jones reference. So that's definitely what I took from it, just as a non-fan.
Yeah, it was pretty good. We also watched Evander Holyfield recap highlights of him knocking out MVP, and had 2 ears and was being told by MVP to do what he wanted, and MVP is not Mike Tyson, and that's the only person who can tell Evander Holyfield what to do, because he will eat his ear off. So a couple of questions I wrote down before that I wanted. MVP's skill as a basketball player was on display. He got to show off a little bit of the handle, show off the range, show off the athleticism. If he were an NBA prospect going to the draft, from what you just saw, more footage than anybody saw of Giannis, mind you. No one saw any Giannis footage. Is he a lottery pick?
No, he's built like a linebacker. Like, there's no way. There is exactly one archetype of player that worked in that mold, and those players don't work in the modern NBA anymore. Like, it's
Desmond Bane didn't go in the lottery.
Yeah, it's true.
What's that?
Desmond Bane didn't go in the lottery.
There you go. And he's only 6'2" or 6'3" we determined, or was he 6'3" or 6'4"?
Who,
like
MVP?
That's
MVP's 6'3".
Okay, so MVP's 6'3". So keep in mind, Desmond Bane, if you want to go Desmond Bane route, you're assuming that he has a little bit of creator equity. He's got like a handle and a crazy touch and whatever. Okay, maybe you can talk me into some form of... But the way that he was built reminded me more of the PJ Tucker conversation that we had earlier, which is like the stretch four essentially being dead in the modern NBA unless you literally are PJ Tucker, who like is a psycho hard worker, rebounder, grinded out kind of guy. So I don't know, what's his mindset? What's MVP? What's he like? That's the kind of guy where like I'm not even doing a bit right now. Like, one of the things that you actually can tell a little bit in interviews with guys is like, if you listen to Desmond Bane pre-draft podcasts, going back and looking at it with the hindsight that we have now, you're like, how did this guy not go higher? Because of the way that he talked and the way that he was just like so like for a 22-year-old at the time, it was like he was giving like amazing answers. He talked about exactly how he needed to get better and what he would do to get better and shit like that. And you're like, what the hell? And now, obviously, we all know he should have went in the top 5 or 6 of that draft. But you got to know the dude's competitive mindset. I really do. I used to think that was a joke, but now the older I get, the more I'm like, I actually do think that there is, at the highest levels, you need to have that dog in you.
MVP was in prison.
Oh.
So yeah,
got that dog in him.
He was in prison. Jeez.
He was in prison.
Yeah, and then got out and became a WWE wrestler. So what a good story.
That's why he wears a singlet, because Vince McMahon doesn't like his prison tats.
Yeah, he's got some nice memories from it. So
wait, was his character in prison, or was
like,
the man in prison?
The real performer. Yeah, the real.
Okay, that guy was. Jeez.
Yeah, and one of my favorite stories he tells is when he wanted to watch wrestling in prison, and like he was in, I want to say, Miami-Dade County prison, so like not a great prison to be in, and he basically was like, no, we're gonna watch pro wrestling, and the people were like, no, I don't want to watch that fake stuff, and he's like, what? No, it's not. And then like they put on, and it was like Stone Cold Steve Austin, and everyone's like, this guy's great, he's beating up his boss, and it's like suddenly everybody was a wrestling fan all of a sudden. It's like it's a fun little story.
You always hear stories about guys who like go away to prison and they get enlightened by reading like Malcolm X or some shit, and like he went into prison and was like, Stone Cold Steve Austin, I'm going to be there one day, and he got there. Yeah. So you got to give him credit.
Yeah, it's just like, and and he's like a manager type, and he's doing really good. One of the better entertainers on the WWE roster. Mark, what is so you're saying late first round for MVP right now, based off what you saw?
Yeah, Desmond Bain. He's going 26, and he's going to be a steal. Yeah, that's what I'll say.
He's gonna go on the Hustle Merchants, the old Memphis.
I was gonna say the wingspan not looking quite there, but
I mean, look, he's got a deadly 3. He sniped it, nothing but net. Like he did that. He's ahead of the time. Steph Curry, he does the whole he only counts them if they go in, don't touch the rim. Ahead of his time. MVP was.
He was a bucket and a problem.
He was, and that dirty scoundrel Matt Hardy got his Grayson Allen on and threw a ball at his head. Intentionally to harm. That is a flagrant 1. Flagrant 2 even. He should have been ejected. If we're throwing
not in the rule books that you can't throw the ball.
This soft millennial Gen Z generation, back in the 90s and the 80s,
No, back in the 90s, every team would have got up and socked him in the mouth for that. He would have been like, how dare you throw that ball at me?
Would have put some, hair on his chin.
Yeah. And then, unfortunately, we only got the one basket, which I was when I watched it the first time, I could have sworn I had more of a, it got to like 3-2, and then they attacked, but maybe I just.
Classic greasers, always fucking shit up.
Like, man, we get it. You don't like basketball. You like, milkshakes and grease, and you like show tunes or jukebox, hanging with your gal, and putting the moves on it. Don't go to the basketball court then. And I understand the basketball court was in a, the problem was they put a wrestling court in the middle of they put a basketball court in the middle of a wrestling show, which makes me think, how cool would it be if halftime each team sends out a player and they have they got 5 minutes to wrestle, and then whoever wins gets an extra 2 points.
Yeah, that would be great. That would be good for like a Heat Grizzlies game.
So
Jimmy Butler.
He's semi-pro.
We just extended Udonis Haslam's career by another 5 years.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's gonna be 50 playing.
Who was it? It was James Johnson, right? The MMA. He played for the Heat.
I didn't know he did MMA.
Who?
I didn't know.
Yeah, didn't.
Well, he's also a domestic abuser, so that adds up.
Jeez. Yeah. I think so. Right? James Johnson. Yeah, he did. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Woo. Yeah. He's got. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Not good. No. Yikes.
Yep.
Yeah. There's a lot also on his Wikipedia.
That's Heat culture for you.
There's a lot under his professional career. There's a lot of 1-year stints.
Yes. Let's just say on and off the court,
except for the Heat, and
of course. Yeah. Well, he fit the culture.
Yeah, fit the culture. So the other thing that I took from this week, I talked about a little bit, was that I wanted Mike Breen to call a pro wrestling match at some point. At some point, I want him to call pro wrestling. And then Mark said, get Michael Cole, Pat McAfee on. Also a great idea. We also have Jim Ross calling it. But my question about like transferring is,
oh God, is that Joel Embiid's music?
is who is the player, the NBA player, that is most likely to succeed as a pro wrestler? For everything involved, the athleticism, the toll it takes on your body, the amount of work you have to put in, and everything else.
I think it's pretty obvious, personally.
It's clearly shit.
I said Dylan Brooks would be a good heel earlier, but I don't think he would have the dedication to. Although he is kind of like, he's worked his way up. He's grinded as a role player to get where he is now. But I think overall whole package, because you talked about having to have the personality and to sell it to the audience, right? So you have to have the ability to control a room, plus freak athleticism, plus all that. LeBron has got to be number one for this, I think.
Yeah, if he dedicated himself, yeah.
If I wasn't worried about his body breaking down, Joel being like a monster is pretty obviously like an Andre the Giant situation, and Joel's pretty damn good on the mic. Joel can definitely cut a promo. He can definitely play heel. He can also play the king of a city, basically, which is what he is currently. So. I feel like Joel, if his body could hold up, or maybe it's a Brock Lesnar schedule. Mm-hmm. Maybe you get him 3-4 matches a year. He can rest up in between his matches. Load management.
The Kyrie Irving COVID schedule.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Only wrestles when your company is within a 2-hour drive of him. Yeah.
Kawhi Leonard when he feels like it.
I was gonna say Kawhi Leonard. I think could actually be a really good pro wrestler because. You can just be the gimmick where he doesn't talk and you give him a mouthpiece.
He's a mute, yeah.
His whole thing is that he just shows up and you're like, oh shit, here comes Kawhi.
And he looks all sad.
Yeah, just disinterested.
Boban.
The bell ring, yeah.
Boban's a good one.
Boban would be great.
Boban's a good one.
Boban would be. He honestly is like a character within himself.
Yeah,
I just don't know if he could move enough at all. Giant Gonzalez, part 2.
We were talking about heels in the NBA, and one of the greatest heels in the NBA is no longer people still prey on his downfall, but I don't think he gets people don't care as much. But Chris Paul, I think, would be a good wrestler, just because he's really good at doing things to make people hate him. But also
he could be a cop.
Could be. He is. But no, he's also
LeVar Ball was on Raw.
Oh man, LeVar Ball. I thought about doing that as well. But there's no payoff for it other than LaMelo saying the N-word live on television.
Yeah, that happened.
Yeah, this is.
Oh my god!
This is freshman of high school. This is Lonzo.
I was gonna say that must have been a while ago.
Yeah, it was Lonzo.
Yeah.
Lonzo.
It was peak Big Baller Brand days.
Lonzo.
We should have known. Yeah. I like LaMelo as a prospect, but if I had known that's just another.
Yeah,
notch on the resume. He just doesn't give a fuck.
No, LeVar, they WWE making taking advantage of viral. They got much better at it, and they brought LeVar and LaMelo and LiAngelo on to talk. They had the Big Baller Brand shirts. They were doing a whole segment. They're in LA. LeVar comes out. He does this goofy ass run and struggles to roll in the ring, and everybody's laughing at him because. It's funny to watch LeVar Ball roll into a wrestling ring. And then he takes his shirt off. Almost immediately, he takes his shirt off and looks at the Miz. And it's very clear that they gave the Miz hey, we told him to say some of these things. And LeVar didn't remember anything. So LeVar is you think you're some big player, huh? And he goes, I'm the Miz. I am the big player. This is my Hollywood is mine, blah, 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 blah. And he's no, it's mine. And as soon as it's going to be Lonzo's, and people cheered because everybody loved
Lakers.
Lakers.
Sure. Yeah. He would be a really good wrestling heel for sure. Yeah, he has the personality. He would be more of a manager type just because he doesn't have the ability, his son's athletic ability.
A former professional football player, technically.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I think he played he was on the roster.
One of those fake teams?
No.
Okay, like practice squad.
Yeah, LeVar Ball. I think he was on the Jets, right?
That sounds about right.
Yeah, he was a free. Yeah, he like showed up, briefly played for it, and Panthers. So like, good for him. I think also another good pro wrestler would be like Dame, because Dame loves to talk about like the grind, and like he has his gimmick. He's got his gimmick, He's got his finishing move, the grinder. He's Dame the Grinder Lillard.
He doesn't run from it.
Doesn't run from it. You can run from him. He's got the taunt. He's got everything.
Yep.
It's all there. And he's like, people like, we were talking about how he needs to get away from Chris Haynes. Chris Haynes needs to get away from him. But like, Dame is like really entertaining to hear talk when he's not talking about not running from the grind.
He can captivate a room for sure. And he also like, I make fun of him because he's corny, and I think some of his raps are corny. But of the history of NBA players, he's certainly one of the more talented rappers, and has clearly worked to get to the point where he's pretty decent. So he's got that element of him too.
Yeah, it's so Dame Lillard, Chris Paul. I think I would headline a big time event with those two. And then last question that I want to ask here: what wrestler do you think could have been a good NBA player? Now, some wrestlers are small, undersized, and everything, but some of them also are very, very tall. Some of them have even been, like Kevin Nash famously was probably going to be an NBA player, played for the University of Tennessee, blew out his knees, and then became a bouncer at a club. There are players. I mean, and Omos right now played for University of Southern Florida. Was great. The pipeline of like, oh, you're over 7 feet tall. You're not good at pro, basketball, but hey, come to the pro wrestling where you'll stand out even more. Like Taco Fall would be an incredible pro wrestler if he put on like 15 more pounds on every limb. But to your knowledge, as best you can, Trill, and Mark, you have much more in pro wrestling. What pro wrestler would translate best to basketball?
Well, I could say I know I saw the Miz hit the half court shot at the celebrity game, so that's kind of the extent of basketball knowledge that I have. But I actually know him from, because I grew up on Real World and the Challenge, so I knew him from back in the day, and then I knew that he was in the wrestling world, but it wasn't apparent to me how famous he was until he was in the All-Star Celebrity Games. And he was always really athletic on those shows, and then he has that crossover appeal, so I'll go with The Miz. Although he's a white dude, but he's tall and he can hoop a little bit, it seems.
Sam Hauser role,
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Mark, what do you got?
I don't know if you guys are Grum, I should say. I don't know if you've ever seen this, but there's a video that was going around where the NWA wrestlers played the Charlotte Police in a basketball game, and my man Dusty Rhodes had a wet jumper. Just a wet jumper. Dusty Rhodes, he's got that boat in his gut, as Mike Levin would say about David Roddy. He had it, and that's instead of having the dog in him, he had that boat in him. But yeah, Dusty Rhodes, when you said that, he was definitely the name that jumped in my brain there.
That's right, baby. I got me the wettest jumper you don't ever seen. You call Steph Curry the Splash Brother. They call me the Splash Father, baby. That's right. But yeah,
that's good. Dusty's not one of the ones I have. Like I've got a couple in my bag. Like I've got wrestler impressions. I can't do the Dusty.
I've got Dusty, good. And I've got Dusty. I've got Macho Man, and like my Vince McMahon is kind of, but not. I mean, it's just a stain. Like, oh, you're gonna do it, pal. Yeah, like pal. Yeah, and it's like, oh, such good shit, pal. Yeah.
Such good shit, pal.
Such good shit.
I can only really do like wrestler Vince, or not wrestler Vince. I can only do announcer Vince.
Oh, that's
on my impressions. Like, 1, 2, oh, we got him. No, he didn't. Oh, we did not get him.
Vince was one of the worst announcers because if he said, "Oh, he's gonna get him,"
screaming,
he didn't get it, and then he would just be talking like regular conversation, and then be like, "Oh, that's a win for Shawn Michaels." It's like, where's the what happened? Meanwhile, he's yelling at everybody to show emotions. Like, what are you doing? But yeah, so that's overall. I think we ran a little bit longer on the front side of this than I had originally planned. But before we get going, Trill, will start with you. Just final thoughts on your time here on the dork side this week. So everything encompassing the dork side.
Well, it was good. I had a good time. Thank you for having me. I guess the one thing that I will take from this is that there are way more people that I feel like there are way more personalities that I think would actually translate from basketball to wrestling. Like I guess it's a little bit different. I feel like the social media era has kind of redefined the way that we look at basketball players because they have their own social media, they go viral on social media, and some of the people that we talked about have created their own brands and personas, and that's kind of how wrestling has always been. like this has been a thing in wrestling because it had to be part of your brand, right? You had to have a brand to stand out. That was never really a thing with basketball until recently, or sports in general, and now it's more of a crossover. So the influence has been clearly on 10 from the wrestling side and crossed over for the social media generation of basketball.
Yeah, it's not something I thought about until today. So like I'm right there with you. I'm like, oh yeah, like really starting to think about like who would be good at pro wrestling and in sports, like, you know, like Kevin Durant. People are like, oh, Kevin Durant would be a good heel because he does everything for himself, and it's like, but he wouldn't be because he's not. He's just doing what he wants. Like that's not a like that.
Right.
It's not entertaining. It's entertaining within in his bubble of basketball. But
sure, you could call him the Slender Man or the Slim Reaper. But
yeah, absolutely. Like that's
there's some good names.
Some great names, but use it for somebody else. Mark, what about you? Your time here, takeaway from it. What is the takeaway from your time here on the dork side this week?
Yeah, I'm always happy to talk wrestling. I'm definitely a total mark, not just my name. So I'm, I definitely get pigeonholed as a sports guy. So I love talking wrestling. Yeah, I had fun. This is like, even though we went over like probably like my least favorite era in the history of wrestling, like the 07 to 08 area. Like I feel like it's just like there's just not a lot going on that, like, even in 06, like you can get that early part of the year, like the Rumble's good, you know, you have the Rey Mysterio run, you have all that stuff, and it really dropped off until like I was out during this period of time, and I came back for Punk in the Pipe Bomb in 2011. That's kind of, I think that's what brought a lot of people back from this era. But yeah, that's definitely, even though it was a dark period for me, I definitely had fun talking about it.
Hell yeah, that's the important thing. Mark, once again, if you would want to, go ahead. I give my guests a opportunity at the end to replug their stuff, talk about what they've got working up, or bring any awarenesses that they would like to bring up and raise awareness for any causes. There we go. So the floor is yours, Mark.
Yeah, I brought up all my stuff earlier. I plugged it, the draft shows on BGN, and the Painted Lines, and the radio show every Saturday on Fox Sports The Gambler on iHeartRadio. Yeah, I'm sure we'll have Trill on again soon. Maybe we'll have Grum on around WrestleMania. Maybe that's something. That's a pretty good idea I just thought of on the fly.
Don't threaten me with a good time.
But yeah, 11 to 1 every Saturday. Pumped for March Madness coming up. Well, let's go.
Good times. You can find Mark at Mark Henry Jr. _.
There you go.
Not really. If you put in Mark Henry, you're gonna get sexual chocolate. That is not Mark, but it is Mark Henry technically. Trill, what about you? Your where people can find you, what you got working on, anything you'd like to raise awareness for.
Follow me at TrillBroDude. Follow me on your favorite platform of choice, YouTube, Spotify, Apple for Ball podcast, and playback. Watch some games with me. That's honestly been the most fun that we've been having recently, is just watching the games. Sometimes I get drunk for the games and then I rant. Mark, you weren't there for the one the other night, but I ranted pretty hard on the Bucks and how fake their ring was 2 years ago. So sometimes we have a lot of fun on there. And if you enjoy that stuff, follow me on the Patreon.
There you go. Yeah. As a subscriber to, as a hog myself, I cannot recommend anymore. Look, I enjoy the playback because like I tried to do that with like my paper. I'll host pay-per-views and they're so much fun because it's just like
they're a blast.
Everybody gets together and you can bullshit and talk and like
exactly. It's like you're just hanging out with your friends basically.
You know, especially when some people are still rightfully concerned about going out because of the pandemic or just unable to, it's a good way to keep communities together.
Yeah, absolutely.
Highly recommend both of these men's work. They're good stuff. It's great stuff. It's fantastic. Such good shit. And I appreciate it. Thank you guys for coming on.
Peace. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Trill, for coming on, being great guests. Great talk. Love this. And I would have loved to have more time, but I messed around before. We also had a little bit of technical difficulties around like minute 30. You can, obviously, things happen. But hey, look, I appreciate them coming on. You can follow Mark Henry Jr. at Mark Henry Jr. _. That's Junior JR. You can also follow Trill at TrillBroDude. Check out what they're working on with the Tough Coverer and with Ball. Great stuff going on. I love to have them on. Hopefully they come back soon. They enjoyed their time. They come back and they have themselves a wonderful time again. Thank you. Hopefully you guys come back next week. Still don't know. I don't have next week's episode recorded yet. I have about 3 recordings planned, so I don't know which one, but some more Mania stuff coming up. We're probably going to talk about Floyd Mayweather versus The Big Show. We're going to talk about Chainsaw Charlie and more stuff. I can't wait. Also, Wrestlemania is coming up in about 3 weeks right now. Let's see. Yeah, 3 weeks. Can't wait. Love this time of year. Wrestling is great. Raw was great. SmackDown was great. Dynamite was great. Impact is great. I cannot wait for the multiverse showdown. The Impact New Japan, and working with a whole bunch of people. They announced a 4-way tag team match for the Impact World Tag Team titles between Austin Ace and Chris Bay of the Bullet Club, Motor City Machine Guns, Aussie Open. It's so good. Such good stuff. Love it. I'm drawing a blank on the 4th team right now because my brain is just, it's overloaded with good wrestling. So we're gonna call it here. Good episode 81 in the books. Episode 82 next week, same time as always. Thank you guys. You can continue to support us as you always do by just listening. Tell your friends about us. Let them know where you can find us on Twitter at Dorkside Ring, same as Instagram. You can find us on YouTube. If you're watching us on YouTube, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know who you think could do really good in a basketball from pro wrestling or vice versa, who would be a good pro wrestler from the NBA or even college. You want to pick some college coaches or players. I don't know many of them. Who knows who's doing what anymore? I know Jim Boeheim kind of let go, forced retire, whatever you want to call it. About time, old man. And you can find us on Patreon, support.grum.tv. That is a Patreon where you get these episodes early. You get these videos early. You get more and more for your buck. It's great. Thank you so much. And also, I think I said it already, but leave a rating and review, 5-star hopefully, for on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts. That'll help us out as well. I appreciate it. I will see you guys here next week. We'll continue to not take wrestling seriously because wrestling is seriously better when no one is taking it serious. I am Grum, and I'll see you guys next week on the Dork Side of the Ring podcast.